Are you actually building wealth? Or are you just performing the rituals of a wealthy person without checking if the math actually works? Because right now, someone is actually stealing 46,000 Rand of your future wealth every single year. The worst part, it's not a hacker, it's not a scammer, and it's not even the tax man. It's you. You see, thousands of South Africans do exactly that every single year. Not because they're lazy, but because they treat tax-free savings accounts like savings accounts. But it's actually a very powerful financial weapon many people underutilize. Structurally, it's a lifetime limited tax wrapper. That means that the same action can quietly compound for decades or quietly underdeliver depending on the cracks beneath it. A quick disclaimer before we dive in, this is strictly for financial education, not financial, tax, or investment advice. Full disclaimer in the description below. If you've ever felt like you're doing the right things, investing monthly, checking your balance, but your net worth still feels stuck, you're not imagining it. Today we're going to examine 5 common patterns and the mechanics and psychology behind them that mathematically reduce the long-term value of a TFSA and what they reveal about your overall wealth system. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Lakan, and if you're new here, I help people build wealth and achieve holistic success in a rapidly changing world. South Africa's tax year runs from the 1st of March to the 28th of February the following year. However, based on the 2026 budget speech, what has actually changed is the annual contribution limit for TFSAs. SARS notes its increase from 36,000 Rand per year to 46,000 Rand per year, effective from the 1st of March 2026. But the lifetime contribution limit of 500,000 Rand and the penalty of 40% that SARS applies for contributions over the annual or lifetime limit remains the same. Although you can withdraw funds from a TFSA, it is important to understand that this may prevent you from achieving your goals by reducing your lifetime tax-free savings limit. So what is the implication of the increase in the annual contribution limit? Let's explore this through a hypothetical scenario. If you start at 25 and max your TFSA every year, the increased annual contribution limit basically lets you reach the 500,000 Rand lifetime limit about 3 years faster, now being roughly 11 years. In a simplified example, assuming 12% net growth and no withdrawals, that earlier max out could roughly translate to an additional 3 million Rand by the age of 65. So the first pattern is prioritizing a TFSA or other investments whilst carrying high interest unsecured debt, like credit cards, retail accounts, or personal loans. Many people suffer from the sophistication trap, where the feeling of owning the Satrix Top 40 is more pro than paying off a pair of Air Force Ones. And both retailers and banks often utilize the minimum payment illusion to keep consumers in high interest debt, often even over 20%. Let's look at an illustrative example using simple math. You might be targeting returns that historically averaged 10% over the long term, but your credit card interest might be 20% and it's charged regardless of the market conditions. Simply put, this means that for every 1 Rand your investment tries to grow, your debt is actually trying to grow by 2 Rand. Hence, carrying high interest debt is like trying to use a dripping tap to fill a bucket that has a hole at the bottom. No matter how much you add, it leaks faster than it can fill. And the net effect could mean that your wealth grows slower or even makes you poorer, even though your investments are going up. Furthermore, carrying high credit utilization can increase the cost of future borrowing, even against secured assets like income-generating property. This doesn't just translate into a weaker home loan rate, but can also trigger higher risk pricing for certain borrowers. So paying off high interest debt above 12% should be your absolute priority. You need to treat this aggressively. No eating out, no holidays, no luxuries. Treat this as if you are broke, because technically you are worse than broke. And paying down high interest debt is often framed as a guaranteed return equal to the interest saved. Investing still could outperform your debt interest, but it usually underperforms, especially over the short-term horizons or during market drawdowns. The second pattern is going all in on your TFSA with zero liquid capital or cash in the bank. Some people who I classify as optimizers fear idle cash in the bank, thinking that money in a savings account is lazy. Many financial gurus also push this rhetoric as well. You've probably heard this before: if you keep your money in savings, it's actually making you poorer every year. And technically it's true, but here's the thing. Investing is powerful, but only after you've built a 6-month emergency fund that is liquid and instantly accessible. In fact, I personally have a 12-month emergency fund given the geopolitical instability we're experiencing. And because life happens. For example, you lose your job, get hit with an absurd medical bill, or your car breaks down. Without an emergency fund, you're now forced to tap into your TFSA to cover the costs. Without that buffer of liquid cash, you're completely exposed with your pants down to risks and possibly forced to cash out investments at the worst possible time that outweighs any potential gains. The consequence here is permanent structural damage to your TFSA. Unlike traditional investment vehicles, the TFSA's limit is use it or lose it. When you withdraw, you're not just selling shares. You're actually setting fire to your future tax-free status. You are effectively voluntarily paying future taxes to SARS just because you didn't have a cash buffer. And you turn a temporary emergency event into a permanent, lifelong financial loss. Let's look at another illustrative example using simple math. If you withdraw 50,000 Rand from your TFSA to cover an unexpected medical bill, you are also permanently deleting 10% of your 500,000 Rand lifetime contribution limit, since withdrawals can never be replaced under the TFSA rules. Because this capital is no longer protected from tax drag, the true mathematical cost over a 35-year horizon is the forfeit of roughly 1.4 million Rand in future tax-free wealth. In this scenario, using your TFSA as an emergency fund is like permanently shrinking the size of your financial bucket. By trying to over-optimize and not have an emergency fund, you've essentially capped your future wealth at a lower level. So securing an emergency fund after paying off your high-interest debt should be your next priority. Again, you still need to tackle this aggressively. No eating out, no holidays, no luxuries. Treat this as if you are broke, because now you are. Once you've secured a 6-month emergency fund, you can then scale back contributions and redirect the excess into your TFSA. You essentially balance the loss of purchasing power to inflation with the benefit of stability. The third pattern is waiting for the perfect start or delaying investing. This is usually driven by analysis paralysis, spending years researching the perfect ETF, only for the market to enter a bull run. Warren Buffett famously summed up his own success by saying, "My life has been a product of compound interest." So before we look at the numbers, let's understand that the highest leverage wealth generator is rapidly and significantly increasing your personal income. But the second is compound interest. In the future value formula, time is the exponent. It's the most powerful variable driving compound interest. Delaying or interrupting that process doesn't just lose you a few years. It cuts your final financial bucket by more than half, because you forfeit the massive doubling periods that only occur when your bucket is nearly full. That's why, as Charlie Munger warned, the first rule of wealth is to never interrupt compounding unnecessarily. Let's look at an illustrative example using simple math. Imagine Gen Z Josh starts investing at age 25 and maxes out his TFSA for roughly 11 years. He will then hit the 500,000 Rand lifetime limit by the age of 36. He then stops contributing and lets that full bucket compound at 10% for the next 29 years. This results in a tax-free nest egg of approximately 14 million Rand by the age of 65. In contrast, millennial Mark waits until 35 before he starts investing, meaning that even though he contributes the annual limit and maximizes the 500,000 Rand lifetime limit in the same amount of time, he only has 19 years to let that investment compound, leaving him with only 5.4 million Rand at the age of retirement. I mean, still good and much better than Boomer Bob, who left it until he was 50. But by delaying for just a decade, Mark hasn't just lost 10 years of savings. He has forfeited the final doubling periods of the exponent, resulting in a difference of roughly 8.6 million Rand. A gap so large that his financial bucket is less than half the size of Gen Z Josh. Let's also look at creating generational wealth from a TFSA. Savvy Sarah is a mid-career professional earning 950,000 Rand a year. She watched Lakan's video and decided to set up a TFSA for her 4-year-old child and maxes out the 46,000 Rand annual limit. By the time the child is 15, the 500,000 Rand lifetime bucket is completely full. If that investment is left untouched to compound at 10% until the child reaches the age of 65, that mere 500,000 Rand initial investment swells into roughly 104 million Rand tax-free. Sarah has essentially created a generational wealth engine that requires no further contributions for the rest of her child's life. Now, starting earlier doesn't guarantee a specific outcome. Okay, markets can underperform for very long periods, but the point isn't certainty of returns. It's maximizing the opportunity of compounding time. So once you've secured your 6-month emergency fund, you should then start to contribute towards your TFSA. Although your contribution capacity will depend on your unique individual circumstances, situation, and environment, you should try to reach the annual limit of 46,000 Rand. Even on a lower income around 400,000 Rand a year, allocating roughly 20% of your net salary can max out your tax-free annual contribution limit, ensuring that the exponent of time is being maximized. The fourth mistake is using a cash-based TFSA for long-term wealth generation. A mistake I personally made when I first started out. Like many people, I just went to my bank and asked to open up a tax-free savings account, assuming that all TFSAs were equal. And then only after more than a year, I learned that these safe money market and fixed deposits accounts are good for protecting your principal, but they are the wrong vehicle for long-term wealth generation because they lack the compounding power of the stock market. Upon further research, I discovered that there are various TFSA vehicles, like ETFs or similar equity-based portfolios that are much better in helping me achieve my long-term financial goals. In the context of our 35-year investment runway, choosing a cash-based TFSA over an equity-based one isn't just a safe choice. It's an opportunity cost that can leave your bucket significantly underfilled. So a TFSA isn't really a savings account, it's a tax shield. Treating a TFSA as a savings account is like wearing a bulletproof vest to protect you against a water pistol, while leaving your real wealth completely exposed to a sniper. You'll be working so hard to shield a little bit of interest tax that you've left your long-term growth wide open to capital gains tax, which is the real threat to your wealth post-retirement. Let's look at another illustrative example using simple math. Imagine both Gen Z Josh and conservative Chris start their TFSAs at the age of 30, maxing out the annual limit of 46,000 until they reach the lifetime limit of 500,000. Josh understands that the TFSA is a growth engine, so he chooses an ETF-based one, targeting an average of 12% per year. Over a 35-year runway, Josh's bucket swells to a staggering 15 million, completely tax-free. Meanwhile, Chris plays it safe, putting his money in a cash-based TFSA at his bank, earning 7% interest. Over the same 35-year period, Chris's bucket only grows to roughly 4 million Rand. Even though they invested the same, 500,000, Josh ends up with a TFSA retirement fund 4 times bigger than Chris's. By using a waterproof vest to protect him from a water pistol, Chris left his real wealth exposed to the sniper of low growth, proving that in a TFSA, the safest choice is often the most expensive mistake you can make. So now let's assume you've cleared your debt, have a 6-month emergency fund, and started contributing towards a TFSA. If your investment horizon is longer than 15 years, you should consider prioritizing higher yield TFSA options, such as ETFs, even if they carry more risk. With that runway, you can withstand periods of significant drawdown and allow compounding to work in your favor. Here are some common ETF TFSA South Africans can research on their own or discuss with their FSP-registered financial advisor. Personally, I have transferred my cash-based TFSA from my bank to the Satrix MSCI World ETF using the Easy Equities platform. I did this via Section 12T of the Income Tax Act, which allows you to move funds without affecting your lifetime limits, provided that you use a direct provider-to-provider transfer with a formal transfer certificate. Failing to do this, for example, you withdraw the cash yourself, breaks the bucket, and reinvesting those amounts can trigger severe penalties of up to 40% on anything above your annual or lifetime contribution limit. The fifth and final pattern is investing manually whenever you feel like you have extra cash. This leads to the market timing ego, which is where you think you can outsmart the market, and even shiny object syndrome, where you jump from TFSA to crypto to target date funds, even property, without maximizing any. Wealth is the result of average returns over above average time. You skip months when stressed or overinvest when you get greedy. An automated system removes the human, allowing the math to work. Without an automated personal finance and investing system, you can become a perpetual beginner. You spend your whole life starting an investment plan, but never hitting the critical mass where the money starts making more money than your actual job. The consequence can be that you are forced to work until you die because you never built that machine that could replace your salary. You could be trading your life force for a paycheck just because you didn't want to automate a system. So if your bank allows and you can afford, set up an automated payment system from your bank account to your ETF TFSA. Ideally, this should also be the full 46,000 Rand annual contribution during the first week of March, i.e. the beginning of the tax year. This allows you to maximize your full annual contribution for the entire tax year. But if your bank doesn't allow automated annual payments, set up a reminder on your phone's calendar so that you can do it manually. And if you can't afford to pay the full 46,000 Rand once off, you can still set up automated or scheduled monthly payments from your bank account to your TFSA. Most South African banks allow this. Schedule an automated payment of 3,830 Rand every month. This also just gives you a small buffer so that you don't exceed the annual contribution limit, as the 40% tax penalty for over-contributing is a mistake you want to avoid at all costs. Just another tip: on most platforms, you actually can't see how much you have contributed to your TFSA. So most people actually use a separate Excel spreadsheet to track their annual contributions. Additionally, when you get close to reaching that 500,000 Rand contribution limit, it is advisable to stop with the automated payments and start doing those manually. Now, some of you may have watched, listened, or read my content, and you may be thinking, but Lakan, a 6-month emergency fund right now would feel like I've won the lottery. I mean, I can't even find a way to clear my credit card. If that is you, then you need to aggressively focus on increasing your income ethically. Not Forex, not gambling, not scamming. There's also a popular mantra that gets preached by frugality financial gurus in the financial education space, made famous by Robert Kiyosaki in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that goes, it's not about how much money you make, but it's about how much money you keep. This advice works well for people who earn well, but still can't get a hold of their finances, meaning that they are big earners, but even bigger spenders. But if you are a low to mid-income earner, I'd say less than 600,000 Rand per year, it's likely that you don't have a spending problem. You have an income problem. So stop wasting your money on financial gurus that are selling you hope, and put that money into things that are actually going to increase your income. But I'm curious to hear from you. Do you disagree with anything that I've said? If so, please share it in the comments below with the specific details, in case there are nuances and value that is better suited to other individuals, which I haven't covered in this general overview. If you remember one thing from this video, let it be this. A TFSA is simply a constrained tax wrapper. The wrapper can be useful, but it can't override debt mechanics, liquidity risk, behavioral error, or a weak investment strategy or system. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and turn your bell notifications on so that you don't miss any future uploads. And follow me on my other platforms, because this month we're exploring building wealth and career success.